Well, it has certainly been a minute. It's been so long that I have a beard now. So it's been a while, I know. Several of you have asked, is this channel dead? Can't wait for the next video, etc., etc. But I have two announcements about what's going on at this point. Actually, it's sort of one announcement with two parts. In short, I am moving to a podcast format. Basically, this channel has been great. It's been a really interesting project to work on over the years. But as you probably know if you've watched some of the previous videos that I've done, I have depression and anxiety, and mental illness has made this channel kind of an undue burden on me creatively, and with this sort of like production quality creep, I guess. Each new video I had kind of greater aspirations for. They were getting longer. It was becoming bigger and bigger with more and more stuff to do, and it sort of became a source of anxiety. And yeah, I figured it was time for a change. First of all, I am very excited about this podcast project. I think podcast sort of meets me more where I am, a little less showy, a lot less me in front of a camera, being a body, doing things, and a little more disembodied voice stuff, so. But the podcast is called Inside the Text, and it is pretty much going to be doing the same types of things I've been doing on Electric Didact, but in audio format, it'll kind of let me do some different things, maybe look more at music, certainly audio culture, but for those who were excited about the series on the moral function of fiction and the questions surrounding that I teased in the Mulan video, I am planning on tackling that in the podcast. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in the Electric Didact YouTube channel, I really encourage you to go and subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast pretty much anywhere right now. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on Google Podcasts. Yeah, all those links down below. That being said, there are like 2,500 of you subscribed to this channel right here. So what I'm going to do is show you guys the podcast right now. And also, I will try posting video versions of the podcast here on this channel. So you can stay subscribed. You can get the podcast here. And if you are a podcast listener otherwise, I'd encourage you to also go and subscribe to it on your podcatcher of choice. I was going to do like a spiel describing the podcast, but I'm just going to leave you with the first episode, which is kind of short, but I think it does a good job of like kind of laying out in like a manifesto format what I'm hoping to achieve and what I'm hoping to do with the podcast. So I hope you enjoy. I'm not leaving per se, but I am kind of making a transition in my creative life, and so I hope you'll join me, and I hope that you'll stick around. And yeah, thank you. Okay, here's the podcast. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Or so says Shakespeare's star-crossed Juliet. But would it? If a rose were instead called, I don't know, a trickle spoop, that's with a K, by the way, would it smell the same? Or would it mean the same? Would it still signify love? Would socialists proudly don trickle spoops on their lapels? Can you imagine learning about the English War of the Trickle Spoops in history class? What about something else? I mean, roses aren't that important to most people. What about something like the word military? If we called it, say, defense, would it still smell, as bad? What if instead of referring to your friend as she, you insist on saying he, the pronoun she used to use before she transitioned? Okay, let's think about signs a bit more broadly. What if instead of standing with your hand on your heart when the Star-Spangled Banner starts to play, you take a knee? What if a slogan showing approval of and respect for the police,
all lives matter,
takes as its model an existing slogan that protests and criticizes the police for its historic pattern of violence against racial minorities?
Black lives matter.
I don't know, but it seems like the names of things, the words we use, the signs we use, aren't inconsequential at all, Juliet. I mean, they matter. We are caught up in language, we humans. And by language, I don't just mean words. If, as the field of semiology argues, any given sign is made up of a signifier on one hand, the thing that's heard or seen or read, and on the other hand, a signified, the thing that it conjures in your head when you interpret it, then boy, signs are all over the place. I mean, you got words, obviously, phrases, sentences, but also book covers, sounds and songs, certain chord progressions within songs, bodily gestures, postures, the way you smile or stand, clothes, colors, literal signs along the road and on doors and on t-shirts, but, tattoos, paintings, pipes, not to mention pipes that are said not in fact to be pipes, memes, graphs, charts, food, the eggplant emoji.
Wow, such language. Much amaze.
Now, bunches of language, these strings and threads of signs that we speak or pick up at the bookstore or download online or read or watch or listen to and joke with, are what some literary theorists like to call capital T texts. When you drill down, you find out that texts are like tissues. These multidimensional webs of signs, quotations, cross-references, footnotes, symbols, symptoms. And just like us socialized meatbags, texts never stand in isolation, but rather come into being through and are only ever intelligible via capital L language. All these associated systems of signs, ideologies, histories, cultures, ways of life, even other texts. Now, this podcast gets its name from a quote because, hi, nice to meet you, I'm an English major. The quote's from a seminal essay of literary philosophy by Jacques Derrida, and it usually gets translated from the original French to say something like,
there is nothing outside the text.
Now, a better translation of Derrida, most agree, would be more like,
there is no outside text.
In other words, a text might have a context, a pretext, a subtext, but there's no way to read something deeply enough or hard enough to get at some ultimate or original meaning beyond or behind language, say, an outside text. At least, not that we can directly access. Which brings us to the name of this podcast, Inside the Text. We're tied up in language, shot through with meanings, and if the world for us only really exists for us in any real way to the extent we're capable of interpreting it, then we got to admit that there are texts all around us. We are always inside of some text, as it were, always faced with what demands to be interpreted, to be read, to be understood, whether it be a book or a show or a podcast or a person on the street or a photo of a kid or a sign above the door, a Doge meme on the TL. We're used to thinking about the way things are, the things everyone does, the order of society, stuff like that, as being, normal, just there, real, solid, whatever. But if we're surrounded and even constituted by and through language, then that actually means that the world is inherently unstable, oscillating from sign to sign, from one interpretation to the next, from meaning to meaning. Which is to say, it's subject to change. And we humans, we readers, have a responsibility, I think, to read it closely. If reading is always a form of rewriting what's in front of us, and I think it is, then it's up to us to rewrite the world better, even if it'll always only ever be something toward which we strive. Whew. So, what is this podcast about? Well, a few things. One, it's really fun to dive deep into everyday culture and take it seriously. So, doing that. Two, it's about reading cultural texts and literary ideas in their political contexts. And three, it's about play. Play as in the indeterminate play of language, bouncing between meanings and signs and swinging on its hinges. Play as in dramatization and imaginative performance. Play as in making jokes. Play as in the game of hopscotching across texts and theories and puzzling out what it all means. If that sounds good to you, then stick around. My name's Jed Cole, and you are inside the text.